A laugh came from the back of the room, loud, deliberate, mocking. The kind of laugh designed to humiliate. The kind of laugh designed to challenge. The kind of laugh that instantly changes the atmosphere of an entire room. And on that cold November afternoon in 1972, inside California State Correctional Facility, every head turned toward the source, including Bruce Lee's. For a moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even the prison guards froze. So everyone knew exactly who had laughed. And everyone knew exactly what it meant. The man slowly stood from his chair, 6 pies 5 pulgadas tall, more than 250 libras, broad shoulders, thick neck, massive arms covered in faded prison tattoos. His nose had been broken so many times it leaned slightly left. His hands looked more like weapons than human body parts. And his eyes were completely fearless. Or at least they appeared that way. His name was Victor Volkov, but nobody inside California State Correctional Facility called him that. They called him Titan. Clear's throat, not because he was strong. Lots of inmates were strong. Not because he could fight. Lots of inmates could fight. They called him Titan because nobody had ever seen him lose. Not 11. Over 7 years inside the prison, Viktor Volkov had become a legend. Guards feared him. Inmates feared him. Even gang leaders preferred avoiding him. 3 men had left the prison hospital after fighting Titan. Clear's throat, 1 never returned to the yard. Nobody challenged him anymore, nobody except Bruce Lee. Or at least that's what Titan believed. At the front of the cafeteria stood Bruce Lee. 32 years old, black mandarin collar shirt, black trousers, calm posture, relaxed expression, the smallest fighter in the room, and somehow the most dangerous. Bruce had come to the prison as part of a rehabilitation program. The warden hoped inmates might listen to him. Not because he was a movie star, because he represented discipline, control, self-mastery, things prison desperately needed. For nearly 20 minutes Bruce had spoken about responsibility, about controlling anger, about choosing who you become. Most inmates listened carefully. Some looked skeptical. Some looked inspired. But one man looked amused. Titan. And then he laughed. Now he stood towering above everyone else, a giant among giants. The cafeteria became silent. 200 inmates, 30 guards, every eye fixed on him. Titan smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator. You done it? The question echoed across the room. Bruce looked at him calmly. Not yet. Titan laughed again, louder. Good. Another laugh. Because I got something to say. Several guards exchanged nervous glances. This was bad, very bad. Whenever Titan decided to make a point, someone usually got hurt. Warden Robert Callahan immediately stood from his chair. He knew Titan better than anyone. The giant inmate had spent years making life miserable for everyone around him. Violence, threats, intimidation, always staying just barely inside prison rules, always careful enough to avoid extra years, always dangerous. Titan looked directly at Bruce Lee. The room held its breath. Then he spoke. Out there, he pointed toward the world beyond the prison walls. Maybe you're somebody. A pause. Maybe you're famous. Another pause. Maybe people buy tickets to watch you play kung fu. The inmates laughed nervously. Titan smiled. But in here, his voice became colder. In here, you're just another man. Silence. The challenge was obvious. Nobody missed it. The cafeteria suddenly felt much smaller. The tension became physical, something you could almost touch. Titan took a step forward, then another. Do you think all that philosophy means something? No response. Do you think all those movies mean something? Still no response. Titan grinned. Step into the yard with me. A pause. No cameras. Another step. No stuntman. Another. No scripts. Now the giant stood only 15 feet away. The guards were ready. Hands near batons. Hands near radios. Waiting. Hoping. Praying that Bruce Lee would ignore him, walk away, and the speech, leave. Because everybody knew what happened when Titan got what he wanted. People got hurt. Badly. Bruce studied him quietly, not intimidated, not angry, just observing. The same way he observed opponents, the same way he observed students, the same way he observed life itself. Titan mistook the silence for fear. Most people did. That's what I thought. He sat down, crossed his massive arms, and smiled. The challenge had been issued. The entire prison had witnessed it, and Bruce Lee had not accepted, at least not publicly. The speech continued. Bruce talked about discipline, choice, purpose. But the energy had changed. Every inmate kept glancing toward Titan. Every guard remained tense. Even the warden couldn't focus because everybody was thinking the same thing. What would happen next? When the event ended, inmates began filing out. Chants rattled, doors opened, orders were shouted. But Bruce remained standing, watching, thinking, and most importantly, observing Titan. Because while everyone else saw a monster, Bruce saw something different. Pain. Hidden pain. Years of it. The kind of pain that transforms into anger. The kind of pain that eventually becomes violence. The kind of pain Bruce Lee understood very well. Later that evening, inside Warden Callahan's office, Bruce sat drinking coffee. Outside the window, the prison yard was empty. Gray concrete, barbed wire, watchtowers, a kingdom of cages. The warden sighed heavily. I'm sorry about Titan. Bruce smiled. Why? Callahan looked confused. Because he disrespected you. Bruce shook his head. No pause. He revealed himself. The warden frowned. What does that mean? Bruce leaned back, then asked a question. Who was he before prison? The warden stared at him for several seconds, then slowly walked toward a filing cabinet, opened a drawer, and removed a thick file. The file landed on the desk with a heavy thud. Bruce glanced down. The first page showed an old photograph, a much younger Viktor Volkov. No prison tattoos, no scars, no hatred in his eyes, standing beside a karate trophy, smiling. Bruce looked up, interested now, very interested. The warden sat down, then said something that immediately changed everything. It was supposed to become a champion. Bruce's eyes narrowed slightly. The warden continued. Fight Team California Karate Champion. A pause. National Scouts were watching him. Another pause. It was being considered for international competition. Bruce remained silent, listening. The warden looked toward the photograph, then spoke quietly. But anger destroyed everything. Bruce looked down at the file again, and for the first time, he understood Titan completely. Because suddenly, he wasn't looking at a prison legend. It was looking at wasted potential. And Bruce Lee hated wasted potential more than any opponent he had ever faced. Then the warden revealed the detail that made Bruce sit forward in his chair. The detail that changed everything. The detail that would eventually lead both men into the prison yard, face to face. And force Bruce Lee to make a decision nobody expected. I used to watch your fights. Bruce looked up. What? The warden nodded. Years ago. A pause. Before the prison. Another pause. Viktor Volkov wanted to be Bruce Lee. Silence. Then Bruce slowly closed the file. Because suddenly, this story wasn't about hatred anymore. It was about disappointment. And disappointment is far more dangerous than anger. For a long time, Bruce Lee stared at the photograph. The young man in the picture looked nothing like the giant who had challenged him earlier that day. No scars, no prison tattoos, no hatred, no bitterness. Used confidence. And possibility. Viktor Volkov looked proud. Not arrogant, not violent, proud. The kind of pride earned through hard work. The kind of pride that comes from believing your future is still ahead of you. Bruce picked up the photograph, studied it carefully. How old was he? Warden Robert Callahan glanced at the file. 19, Bruce nodded slowly. 19, young enough to dream. Young enough to change. Young enough to ruin everything. The warden leaned back. It was special. Bruce looked up. So everyone keeps saying. Callahan smiled sadly. Because it's true. A pause. eBay read hundreds of inmate files. Another pause. Most are ordinary. I tapped Victor's folder. This one isn't. Bruce remained silent. Listening. The warden opened another page. Newspaper clippings, tournament photographs, medals, certificates, proof. Evidence of a life that should have gone somewhere. He won his first state championship at 16. Bruce nodded. Impressive. He won his fifth at 21. Another pause. Then everything collapsed. The room became quiet. Outside the office window, floodlights illuminated the prison yard. A cold wind moved across empty concrete. Bruce knew there was more. Much more. What happened? The warden sighed, then answered, his father. Bruce's eyes narrowed. What about him? The warden closed the file. For a moment he seemed unsure, as if he wasn't certain how much to say. Then he made a decision. Victor's father was a fighter, though. A pause. But not the good kind. Silence. The warden continued. He drank. Often. He gambled. Constantly. And when he lost another pause he hit people. Bruce understood immediately. Not because he knew Victor. Because he knew pain. Everyone carries pain. Some people master it. Others become slaves to it. Victor Volkov had become a slave. The warden continued. By age 12, Victor had already been in dozens of fights. Bruce looked down. 12, a child. Still a child. The warden shook his head. Teachers feared him. Students feared him. Nobody understood him. Another pause. Then a karate instructor found him. Bruce looked interested. The first truly interested expression he'd shown all evening. A coach? The warden nodded. Name was Kenji Nakamura. Bruce recognized the name immediately. A respected martial arts teacher from Northern California. Disciplined. Traditional. Highly respected. He saw potential. The warden smiled sadly. Everybody did. For the next 20 minutes Bruce read through the file. Tournament results. Photographs. Letters from coaches. Newspaper articles. The deeper he read the worse it became. Because Victor had not failed because he lacked talent. He failed because he had too much anger. At 23, he was already being scouted nationally. At 24, he was competing against elite fighters. At 25, he was being discussed in martial arts magazines. People believed he could become one of America's best karate competitors. Then came the night that changed everything. A bar, an argument, alcohol, greed, anger, the same ingredients that destroy thousands of lives. Victor had gotten into a fight, then another, then another. By Sunrise, 2 men were hospitalized. One suffered permanent injuries. Victor was arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. The career ended instantly. The dream ended instantly. Everything ended instantly. Bruce slowly closed the file. The office remained silent. Finally, he spoke. Does he train? The warden laughed. Every day. Bruce wasn't surprised. Men like Victor never stopped training. Not physically. The body remains active. It's the mind that becomes trapped. The warden walked toward the window, pointed toward the yard. Every morning at 5. A pause. Every afternoon after lunch. Another pause. Every evening before lockdown. Bruce looked outside. The empty yard suddenly felt different. It could almost imagine Victor there, shadowboxing, punching ghosts, fighting enemies that no longer existed, and losing anyway. The warden lowered his voice. You know what the strange part is? Bruce turned. What? Callahan hesitated, then answered. He still watches your movies. Silence. Bruce blinked. What? The warden nodded. We show movies sometimes. Another pause. When one of yours comes on, a smile, he watches every second. Bruce stared. Confused, curious, interested. The warden continued. But afterward, he's always angry. Now Bruce understood. Completely. Victor didn't hate Bruce Lee. Not really. Victor hated himself. Bruce Lee simply reminded him of everything he could have been. And that kind of reminder hurts. A lot. The next morning, Bruce was scheduled to leave. A black car waited outside the prison gates. The event was over. The speeches were finished. Everything had gone according to schedule, except Titan. Bruce walked through the administration building, past guards, past offices, past steel doors, toward freedom. Then he stopped. Completely stopped. Because through a window, he saw something. Deja. And in the middle of it, Viktor Volkov, alone, clears throat, shadow boxing, exactly as the warden described. His movements were fast, sharp, technically excellent, powerful. Far too powerful for prison. Far too disciplined for prison. Far too talented for prison. Bruce watched silently. Victor moved like a fighter. A real fighter. Not a bully. Not a criminal. A fighter. And suddenly, Bruce realized something. The giant had never challenged him because he wanted a fight. The giant had challenged him because he wanted an answer. An answer to a question he had been asking for years. A question hidden beneath all the anger. A question hidden beneath all the violence. A question hidden beneath every challenge. What could I have become? Bruce stared through the glass, then made a decision. The same decision that would shock the entire prison. The same decision that would bring hundreds of inmates to their windows. The same decision that would place him face to face with the most feared man in California State Correctional Facility. It turned toward the warden. You want to go into the yard? The warden froze. What? You want to talk to Victor? Callahan stared at him, then laughed nervously. Assuming Bruce was joking. Bruce wasn't. The smile disappeared. That's a terrible idea. Bruce looked back toward the giant. Still shadowboxing. Still fighting invisible enemies. No a pause. It's exactly the right idea. And 30 minutes later the entire prison would be watching because Bruce Lee was about to walk into the yard and the most dangerous man in the prison was waiting. The news spread through the prison in less than 3 minutes. Bruce Lee was going into the yard. Not the visiting area. Not the administration building. Not the supervised meeting room. The yard. Viktor Volkov's territory. Guards heard it first, then inmates, then cell blocks, then work crews, then everyone. By the time Bruce stepped through the steel gate, hundreds of eyes were already watching. Some inmates pressed against windows, others stood behind fences, even guards who were supposed to be working found excuses to look toward the yard. Because everybody expected the same thing. Violence. The most feared inmate in the prison against the most famous martial artist in the world. It sounded impossible, which made it irresistible. Bruce walked calmly across the concrete, black shirt, black trousers, hands relaxed, breathing steady. No tension, no fear. At the far end of the yard, Viktor Volkov continued shadow boxing. He hadn't noticed Bruce yet. Or perhaps he had and simply didn't care. The giant's fist sliced through the cold air. Left, right, hook, uppercut. Sharp, fast, technical. Bruce watched carefully. Every movement told a story. Every movement revealed something. Viktor wasn't training to become stronger. He was training because he didn't know how to stop. Some men drink, some gamble, some run. Viktor fought. That was how he survived. That was how he coped. That was how he buried pain. Finally, Viktor noticed him. His punches stopped immediately. The yard became silent. Completely silent. Even the inmates watching from the windows stopped talking. The giant turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Bruce stopped 10 paces away. Neither man spoke. For several seconds, the silence felt enormous. Viktor finally smiled. The same dangerous smile. The same smile that terrified guards. The same smile that made inmates avoid eye contact. You actually came. Bruce nodded. He said I would talk. Viktor laughed. Most people don't. Most people aren't me. The giant's smile widened. Fair answer. The guards remained tense, hands near radios, ready, waiting. Viktor took a step forward, then another. Now only a few feet separated them. The size difference looked ridiculous. Viktor towered over Bruce. More than a foot taller. Nearly 100 pounds heavier. The inmates loved it. Some were already placing bets, quietly, secretly. Because prison is prison. Someone always bets. Viktor looked down at Bruce. Do you know what everybody thinks is about to happen? Bruce smiled. Yes. Viktor laughed. And? Bruce shrugged. They were wrong. The giant tilted his head. Curious now. Not angry. Interested. That was new. Very new. You don't want to fight? No. Viktor looked surprised. Genuinely surprised. Why? Bruce's answer came instantly. Because you've already fought enough. The smile disappeared immediately. The words hit harder than expected. Viktor stared. Trying to decide if he'd been insulted. Trying to decide if he'd been challenged. Trying to decide why those words bothered him, Bruce continued. How many fights since you've been here? Viktor crossed his arms. 17. Bruce nodded. He heard a pause, and what did they accomplish? Silence. Victor said nothing because there was no answer. Bruce took another step forward. The guards became nervous, very nervous. Victor remained still. Did any of those fights make you happier? No answer. Did they make you free? Silence. Did they bring back your career? Victor's jaw tightened. The yard felt colder, much colder, because Bruce wasn't attacking the giant, he was attacking the lies. The lies Victor told himself. The lies that kept him angry. The lies that kept him trapped. The giant's voice became lower. Do you think you know me? Bruce shook his head. No, I think you know you. That landed like a punch, a real punch. The kind that reaches places fists never can. Around them, inmates listened carefully. Many didn't fully understand the conversation, but they understood something important was happening, something different. Victor took another step closer. Now they were almost face to face. The giant looked dangerous, very dangerous. Yet Bruce never moved, never flinched, never broke eye contact. Finally, Victor spoke. Do you know what I hate about you? Bruce smiled slightly. No. The giant pointed directly at him. You became everything I was supposed to become. Silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even the guards seemed frozen. Because there it was. The truth. The real truth. Not anger. Not hatred. Envy. Pain. Regret. Years and years of regret. Victor looked away. For the first time, not Bruce. Victor. He watched your movies. The giant laughed bitterly. He watched every single one. Bruce remained silent, listening. He watched people cheer for you. A pause. He watched the laugh I should have had. The yard felt heavy now. Not dangerous. Sad. Very sad. Bruce nodded slowly, then asked a question. A simple question. The most important question of the entire day. Who told you it was too late? Victor frowned. What? Who told you your life was over? The giant stared. Confused. Angry. Uncertain. Look around. He gestured toward the prison walls. I'm in prison. Bruce nodded. Yes. Another pause. Today. Victor frowned harder. Bruce stepped closer. You keep talking about your past. A pause. You keep talking about what you lost. Another pause. You never talk about tomorrow. The giant opened his mouth. Then closed it again. Because he didn't have an answer. And that frightened him more than any opponent ever had. Bruce smiled gently, then said something nobody expected. Something that would completely change the atmosphere of the yard. Something that would eventually change Victor's life. Do you still want to fight me? The giant looked surprised, then grinned. Finally, yes. Bruce nodded. Good. The yard exploded. Inmates shouted. Guards cursed. The warden nearly had a heart attack because suddenly it sounded like the fight was actually happening. And neither man looked like he was joking. Victor rolled his shoulders, the old excitement returning. The old hunger. The old violence. Bruce calmly removed his watch, handed it to a guard, then stepped into the center of the yard. The inmates pressed harder against the windows. The entire prison watching, waiting, certain they were about to witness a legendary fight. What none of them understood was that Bruce Lee had no intention of teaching Viktor Volkov a lesson with his fists. It was about to teach him something far more painful and far more important. The prison yard erupted. Inmates slammed fists against windows. Voices echoed through concrete corridors. Guards shouted orders. Radios crackled. Even Warden Robert Callahan looked stunned. Because for one impossible moment, it appeared Bruce Lee had accepted the challenge. Viktor Volkov grinned. A real grin this time. Not the cold smile. Not the intimidating smile. A fighter's smile. The smile of a man who had waited years for this moment. Across the yard, Bruce Lee stood calmly. No fighting stance, no raised fists, no aggression. Used calm. Viktor rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, loosened his hands. The old excitement surged through him. The excitement he used to feel before tournaments, before championships, before prison. For a moment, he wasn't Titan. Clear's throat, for a moment, he was Victor again. The young fighter who once dreamed of greatness. The giant stepped forward. Ready? Bruce nodded. Yes. The yard became silent. Hundreds of eyes fixed on them, waiting. Victor raised his fists. Bruce didn't. The giant frowned. What are you doing? Bruce smiled. Waiting. For what? For you. Confusion crossed Victor's face. Then frustration. Then anger. The old familiar anger. The anger that had ruined his life. The anger that always appeared when things didn't happen the way he wanted. Victor charged forward, fast. Far faster than most people expected. The giant closed the distance instantly, then stopped. Because Bruce hadn't moved. Not even slightly. No defensive posture. No attack. Nothing. Just standing there. Watching. Victor hesitated. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. Bruce finally spoke. Go ahead. What? Hit me. The yard froze. The inmates couldn't believe what they were hearing. Neither could the guards. Victor stared. You're serious? Bruce nodded. If that's what you need. The giant's fists tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to swing, to prove himself, to dominate, to win, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. Bruce continued. Hit me. A pause. Then what? Victor frowned. What do you mean? Bruce stepped closer. So, you hit me. Another step. Y fall. Another. Maybe I get hurt. Another. Maybe you win. Silence. Bruce looked directly into the giant's eyes. Then what? Victor opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Because suddenly he realized something. He had never thought beyond the fight. Never. Not once. Bruce continued. You beat me. A pause. What changes? The giant stood motionless. The entire prison listened. What comes next? Victor couldn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer. Only another fight. And another. And another. The same cycle. The same prison. The same anger. The same emptiness. Bruce nodded slowly. Because he could see understanding beginning to appear. Used a little. Used enough. Then Bruce said something that hit harder than any punch. You already beat everyone here. Silence. 17 fights. A pause. 17 victories. Another pause. And look where you are. Victor's breathing slowed. The anger was fading, not disappearing, fading. Bruce pointed toward the prison walls. You're still here. A pause. Still angry. Another. Still trapped. The words landed like hammers because they were true, completely true. The giant lowered his fist slightly. The yard remained silent. Nobody wanted to interrupt. Nobody wanted to breathe. Bruce took one final step forward, now standing directly in front of Victor. The size difference looked absurd. The smallest man in the yard facing the largest, yet somehow Bruce looked bigger. Not physically, spiritually, mentally. Victor's voice cracked slightly. You don't understand. Bruce shook his head. No. Then surprised everyone. Either. The giant stared. Bruce pointed toward his own chest. Do you think I never felt anger? A pause. Do you think I never wanted revenge? Another pause. Do you think discipline comes naturally? Victor remained silent. Bruce smiled sadly. It doesn't. The yard became completely still. Every day, a pause, every single day, another. You choose who wins. Bruce pointed toward Victor's chest. The fighter, then toward Victor's head, or the anger. The giant looked away because for the first time in years, someone had described the battle correctly. Not prison versus freedom, not Victor versus Bruce. Victor versus himself. The hardest fight. The only fight that mattered. Slowly, very slowly, Victor lowered his fists. The inmates watching from the windows couldn't believe it. Neither could the guards. The most feared man in the prison was lowering his guard. For the first time, Bruce extended his hand. Not as a champion, not as a celebrity, as a man. Used to man. The yard held its breath. Victor stared at the hand for a long time. long enough for memories to flood back. His first karate coach, his mother, the trophies, the championships, the dreams, everything he'd lost, everything he'd buried, everything he'd blamed on everyone else. And finally, for the first time in years, Viktor Volkov admitted the truth. The person who destroyed his future wasn't Bruce Lee, wasn't prison, wasn't fate. It was him. The realization hurt terribly, but it was also freeing. Because if he had made those choices, he could make different ones. Slowly, Viktor reached out and took Bruce's hand. The prison yard erupted. Not with violence, with applause. Hundreds of inmates, dozens of guards, even Warden Callahan. Nobody expected this ending. Nobody. Bruce smiled, then quietly said, "You haven't lost your life." A pause. Jube only lost time. Viktor's eyes filled with emotion, not tears, something deeper, recognition, ope, the thing he'd been missing for years. Months later, Viktor enrolled in prison education programs, anger management, counseling, mentorship. The violence stopped. Not overnight, not perfectly, but it stopped. Years later, when Viktor Volkov finally walked out of California State Correctional Facility, he carried very little, a small bag, a few books, and one photograph, a photograph of a prison yard, a giant fighter, a small martial artist, and the moment his life changed forever. Because Bruce Lee never defeated Titan with speed, never defeated him with strength, never defeated him with technique. It defeated him by showing him the opponent he had been running from all along, himself. And that became the greatest victory of Viktor Volkov's life. Because some fights aren't won with fists, they're won with choices. And on a cold afternoon in 1972, inside a California prison yard, Bruce Lee helped a broken man make the first good choice he'd made in years, and that choice changed everything.